Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Hewitt and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. And for those of you who haven't attended a webinar with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand facilitate an annual training calendar of online webinars, workshops, boot camps and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all things digital. And you can check out our training and education menu on the website for more events coming up online. So welcome today to the webinar, How to Use Online Tools to Achieve Your Goals, with Marcus Harvey and guest speakers Adam Pulford and Nina O'Connor. And before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping today. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type them into the questions box and I should be able to help. If you have any questions during the session, please type these into the questions box and we will have a Q&A coming up at the end of today's webinar. Please just note that your comments and questions aren't visible to the rest of the group. And if you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, please just close any programs you're not using to get the best quality of audio and sound and screen sharing. Please note this webinar is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the slides and the recording towards the end of today. And just before we start, I'd like to remind everybody that we do have a quick survey, short survey that will come up at the end of today's webinar, and we would really love any feedback from anybody. So thanks, that's all from me. I will pass over to Marcus to do the intros. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jane. And look, I've got to say, I'm really excited today. It's not often we get two people talking with the same degree of experience, non-profit expertise, and real-world ability to make a difference as we've got with Adam and Nina today. Adam's a media and campaigns consultant who has more than a decade's experience working across a whole range of social and environmental justice campaigns. Until recently, as the Director of Operations Engagement at the Climate and Health Alliance, and he's worked for a whole range of other organisations that he's really used his social and digital media expertise to build strong supporter base and drive change for good. So really excited to have Adam. And Nina, who's a digital campaigning and mobilising expert, has worked internationally. So we've brought the international experts here for you today. In the US, particularly for more than a decade with their Australian experience as well. And Nina specialises in building the capability of movements and organisations to run digital engagement and fundraising programs that deliver real results. With specific experience in campaign strategy and program management at the Greens, Get Up, Time's Up, People's Movement, etc. So thrilled to have them here and hope you all learn an awful lot from them today. I know I will. I do need to say a big thank you to Victorian Government's Digital Innovation Festival. Have made today's webinar possible. Today is the fourth in a series of 5 webinars that we're running. Everything's online in the new COVID normal world. And we really encourage you to browse the whole DIF program available. If you look up the Digital Innovation Festival, there's more than 300 separate webinars and learning opportunities for you to get involved and engaged and build your skills and help your organisations have a greater impact. I do want to start, thanks for the next slide, today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I'm joining today from Bunurong country in the Kulin Nation, but recognise that you will all be joining from all over the country and throughout Victoria. And pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect particularly to everyone of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander on the call today. I want to talk for a second about the Digital Transformation Hub because this has really become quite apparent over the past 2 years since COVID hit, that a range of non-profits are challenged by the existing environment we're working within. And it was really difficult for Info Exchange in the early days because we were flooded with calls because people needed to work effectively from home. And to address those issues, we were very lucky to get some funding from Gandel Philanthropy and the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation that allowed us to build the hub. And it's really designed to help organisations make the most out of technology, and everything on the hub is free. So, it's, and from the technology quiz to assess your readiness, understand where you're at in terms of digital marketing, campaigning, strategy, etc. We've got case studies of organisations that have been through the process. We've got digital guides to help you build your capability, a whole range of training resources, including a bunch of webinars from Connecting Up, such as this one, the ability to book expert advice sessions for free with both our own staff and with a broad range of volunteers who can really bring tailored expertise to your situation, and a bunch of technology discounts for nonprofits, because we know that every dollar you spend on tech is another dollar you're not spending on service delivery and improving things for your clients, your members, and the broader community. So with that, the hub in mind, we've got 5 separate areas that we've focused things in to help structure your way through what many organisations find a bit of a technology jungle. There's tech foundations, getting your core infrastructure correct so people can work effectively from home, share information, your information systems so that you can deliver services efficiently, measure your impact, and report to funders or report your impact to your stakeholders and supporters. Digital marketing to engage effectively with your stakeholders and your supporters and bring new people and organisations to your cause. IT management, so you're making the most out of every IT dollar, and cybersecurity, so you're keeping things safe. So I really encourage you to have a look at the Digital Transformation Hub, digitaltransformation.org.au, and you'll find those resources as well as the ability to book an expert consult and a whole range of other things. I'm going to hand over to Adam now, and Adam's going to start to give you his insights and tell you a little bit about his story and how you can leverage that in your own worlds. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Marcus. Hi, everybody. As Marcus said, my name is Adam Pulford. Today, we're looking at delivering an engagement strategy using online tools to connect with potential clients or supporters, build your supporter base, and raise funds. So we're going to be looking at the overarching concept of building an engagement strategy, which is a strategy that connects the dots between building a supporter base, and raising money from those potential clients or donors, doing it all online. So today we're going to provide this overarching framework, and then we'll share 2 case studies from our work so we can see what it looks like in the real world. Along the way, both Nina and I will highlight key lessons and takeaways. So at the end, you'll be able to ask us questions based on the content of the workshop. So Marcus kind of covered my background, so I won't say much more. I was elected to Moreland City Council in 2020, and I live in Coburg in Melbourne's inner north, on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. Nina is dialing in from Brunswick, which is very close by and the same traditional owners as well. Nina, did you want to mention anything on your?
Yeah, so Marcus already covered most of this, but my name's Nina O'Connor. It's great to have you all here today. And I recently moved back from the States about 6 months ago, having spent 5 years working in New York for a bunch of different nonprofits. So I'm really excited to be back in Australia, stuck in my house, but it's a beautiful day here in Melbourne. So I'm really happy to be here with you all, and let's jump into it. Adam.
Awesome. So yeah, as Marcus said, just write down any questions you have throughout and we can address some of them at the end. So an engagement strategy. This is an organizational strategy that's developed to successfully engage supporters or customers throughout the lifetime of their involvement with your organization. It essentially covers the different stages of someone's relationship with your organization, from when they join to when you're communicating with them and asking them to take action, to attend events, learn about the issues or deepen their involvement with your organization, and ultimately to them actually converting into someone who's more deeply involved. And usually that's by making a donation or by purchasing a product. An engagement strategy looks at these pieces as an overarching process, but realizes that all of those pieces are quite interconnected. So we understand today that people from all over the country are dialing in, working on different missions in different organizations of different sizes and budgets. So we understand that those different budget limits, the different capacities of the organization you represent, it'll affect how much of the strategies, the technologies, and the tactics we talk about today, how much you can implement those. For example, an engagement strategy with a $100,000 annual budget, obviously their engagement strategy will look very different to a nonprofit with a $10 million or more dollar annual budget. Nina and I have worked hard to ensure that the lessons in this workshop are relevant regardless of the size of your organization. And you'll see that in the different case studies that we talk through. So this is the engagement strategy broad framework. I'm just going to talk about it in general, and then Nina will go through each step in a bit more detail. So this represents the lifetime of a supporter's involvement with your organization. Acquisition is about growth. It's about how new people initially become supporters of your organization. And by supporters, we mean people who are following you on social media or on your email or call list. Acquisition looks at not only how they join, but how you onboard them and welcome them into your general supporter database. Acquisition could be organic through social media. It could be paid through digital advertising or through a partnership with another organization. Then we have engagement. This is the work you do to keep a supporter active, involved, and bought into your mission and your work. Many of us will be engaging with our organization's supporters every day through social media posts, through emails, through text messages, phone calls, newsletters and updates, those kind of things. Then finally, conversion is the ask that you make of your supporters to deepen their involvement with you. Will you donate? Will you buy a product? Will you become a regular giver? Will you take action in some other deeper way? For many nonprofits, conversion is turning someone who is a general supporter, someone who just follows you and pays attention to you, into a donor. This image shows the different steps to deepen your engagement with supporters, from acquiring them to engaging with them to converting them. But in reality, it's not a person's involvement with you isn't a linear process, because once you've acquired them, you'll go on hopefully go on a cycle of engagement where you engage with them and ask them to deepen their involvement. They will at times, which they'll convert into a donor or to somebody, just to a customer. And that cycle will continue of engagement and conversion until they stop being involved, stop being a supporter of your organization, for example, by unfollowing you on Facebook or by unsubscribing, which happens, it happens.
Thanks, Adam. So we're going to go into a bit more detail, into a bit more depth of each of these three areas. So firstly, acquisition. Acquisition is, like Adam said, it's the process of maintaining and growing your supporter base. This can look like paid acquisition through tools like Facebook Ads Manager, promoting a petition or a product. It can look like organic growth through growing your social media audiences and then transitioning these people onto an email list. It's an important part of any engagement strategy, because no matter how good we are at our jobs, we will experience unsubscribes and disengagement. So acquisition in that way isn't just about growth. It's also about ensuring your supporter base doesn't shrink. There are a wide range of technologies that can support your acquisition work, and we'll talk through some of those in our case studies later in the workshop. Some important questions, though, to answer when you embark on an acquisition strategy are things like that we've got up here on the slide. So who are the supporters you want to acquire? What platforms do they use? Where do they spend their time online? Can you use social media to acquire them? And what are the ways you can recruit them paid or free? How are you onboarding these new supporters? Once they sign up, then what? How can you ease them onto your list so they don't end up asking themselves, why am I receiving these emails? What is the value of a new supporter? If you can work out how much an average supporter donates over the course of a year, this can help your team make the case for an investment in paid acquisition through, for example, something like Facebook ads. And finally, are you being authentic in the acquisition and onboarding process? Clickbait can make it easier to get someone to sign up quickly, but you need to ask yourself, is it worth spending budget bringing these people on? They typically unsubscribe at much higher rates and aren't the type of audience that's most likely to be retained and activated. So it's important, while still being compelling and communicating urgency, that you also be authentic in how you talk about your organization. Engagement. This is essentially the way in which you are, in an ongoing way, communicating with and interacting with and activating your supporters. Like Adam said, much of what we do is engagement. For example, when we post on social media, there are a variety of technologies and tools that we can use to engage our supporters and ensure they're bought in and active. It's incredibly difficult to convert a disengaged supporter into a donor. So engagement is an ongoing process throughout the year and can look different depending on the context that you're in and the type of organization that you're working for. Some prompts for how you should be thinking about engagement are you giving supporters opportunities to play an active role in achieving your mission? Often I hear people worried about hassling their supporters. They don't want to hassle their supporters. But actually, supporters want to take an active role in helping you achieve your mission. That's why they signed up, to support your organization. So you need to ask. Secondly, are you providing a diverse range of engagement opportunities and tactics? There are a lot of ways you can engage your supporters, even in the current world where offline activities are really limited. And thirdly, are you engaging your supporters in an ongoing way? It's important not to let supporters stagnate, because they will disengage. You need to regularly be communicating with your supporters. And finally, conversion. This is the process of converting a supporter into a donor. I want to note here, like Adam said, for some organizations, the final conversion might be something different. It could be purchasing a ticket, attending a workshop like here at Connecting Up. And obviously that would be depending on your organization's mission. But throughout, we'll be using converting to a donor because we think it's the most broadly applicable, but the lessons here are relevant regardless. So with conversion, firstly, to convert supporters to donors or to step up their contribution, you have to ask, and you have to ask often. Secondly, you need to ask yourself, is there an opportunity for me to upsell here? Not only should you be regularly engaging with and communicating with your supporters, you should also be inviting them to step up their contribution. Can a one-off donor become a monthly donor? Can they meet or match their last contribution? And finally, and this is really important and something I think we all know intuitively, how are you showing your donors that you value them and that you value their contributions? Many of the CRMs or database systems that we use allow us to segment our supporters based on what their previous interactions and activities have looked like. So you should be using that to target donors as a specific group, creating communication specifically for them, explaining what their contribution has enabled, and thanking them for their support. Over to you, Adam.
Great, thanks, Nina. So now both Nina and I will talk through a case study of a real-world example where we have built and used an engagement strategy in our own lives. We've specifically chosen 2 different examples. My example was of a smaller nonprofit responding to a moment in order to engage its supporters and acquire new ones, with the goal of converting these new supporters into donors at a later date. My example, we didn't spend any money on our engagement strategies apart from using existing resources and existing staff time. Nina's example is of an organization with a larger budget that has proactively developed and implemented a new engagement strategy. So I'll talk through mine first, and then I'll hand over to Nina to talk through theirs. So my example was from when I was working at the Climate and Health Alliance, or CAHA. CAHA is a small nonprofit that works to connect climate change and health. This example is from around October 2019. The organisation was about 4 full-time equivalent staff at that stage, and its annual budget was a couple of $100,000. I started in the role of engagement manager in August in 2019, which was a new position that the organisation had created, and with the responsibility for obviously engagement, what we're talking about today, which was, but including advocacy, fundraising, and digital campaigning communications. When I began my role at Kaha, one of my priorities was to grow our reach online, grow our number of supporters to acquire more, because I see those grassroots supporters as a power base that we can work with to achieve our goals, but also as a pool of potential donors to fund our work. And if we can grow that number of donors, we can grow our work, grow our team, the people doing that work, and also grow our overall impact on the issue of the climate crisis. So the example I'm talking through, it began when formerly the Fairfax newspapers, so the Age and Sydney Morning Herald, they'd recently been purchased by Nine. They became the Nine newspapers. And not long after that, we were approached as an NGO working on climate change to participate in a paid advertising feature on climate change. So you can see on this shot, there's a couple of screenshots of the pitch email that the Nine publishing team sent to us. They offered us, for the small cost, of $5,500 plus GST for our work to be featured in one of their newspapers, or a $10,000 package deal to be featured in both. And you can see it's a very strong marketing opportunity in the sense that they're offering us exclusive mention in editorial, credible, trustworthy environment in which to advertise. Now, look, we got this approach, and frankly, we're a bit outraged, and I'm sure maybe some of you are feeling the same. Firstly, with an organisational budget of a couple of $100,000, spending 10 grand to get our work covered in the media is a significant proportion of that budget. We had, around 4 full-time equivalent staff. But secondly, and I think more importantly, the climate crisis is one of the most challenging issues that we face as a society. And there's a huge issue with climate not being properly reported. And for a media outlet to be wanting to make money off the organisations that are doing the hard work fighting the climate crisis, it just didn't sit right with us. So this actually only started out as engagement. I didn't have a really well thought through engagement strategy embarking on this specific situation. But in general, I knew as the engagement manager, I had the goals of acquiring new people, engaging with them consistently, and converting them into donors. That was kind of underlying my mindset in that role. So you can see we took it to Twitter, we shared some of the screenshots, and we got over 100 retweets really quickly. For our little organization, that was significant. So the first lesson I wanted to share here was social media is a good testing ground for the appetite of your existing supporters on any issue or campaign. Putting it on Twitter was a good temperature check. I felt outraged. My boss felt outraged. We thought, let's call them out for this. And then seeing how many people that resonated with, we realized, okay, people feel the same way. Maybe there's an opportunity here for us to make a difference on this issue by calling it out, but also to engage and grow our supporters. So given the reaction, I've worked as a media advisor in the past. I took it to the Guardian's media reporter, Amanda Mead. And you can see here on the slide, they put in some of our tweets. My boss, the executive director, was quoted in this story. And as the Guardian approached Nine newspapers saying, we've heard about this advertorial, the Nine quickly pulled it. They decided that they didn't want to go ahead with it. I think they felt that public scrutiny of them kind of trying to turn a profit off the climate crisis, that they obviously weren't going to push that any further. I want to say here, I understand that the media outlets, their business model is struggling, and we made sure we reference that in the tweets. We want to support good, healthy, independent media, but we found it galling that they turned to us for that funding. We also spoke to Media Watch, ABC's Media Watch, who were quite interested in this, but because Nine pulled it so quickly, they felt like there wasn't a story, so they didn't end up covering that. So getting media coverage of your work, your organisation, or the issue you're working on, it's an important moment for your organisation. So when this article appeared, we wanted to make the most of that, but we also saw Nine pulling its advertorial so quickly as an opportunity to do more. So we ended up creating a petition, which I'll talk about in a moment, asking Nine to commit to better climate coverage. Given The Guardian had covered us, we referred to the Guardian article in the petition to build kind of credibility and legitimacy with our supporters. This is a real issue. The media is reporting on it. We used a screenshot of that article in our email to supporters when we launched the petition, again, to prove that it was a legitimate ask. We shared the article on social media with the petition, and we shared it with our funders and donors in a general update. Also, if you do get media coverage of your organisation, I think it's really important to put that up on social media the day that you do get that coverage, so that anyone who learns of your organisation through seeing that media coverage, when they look you up online, it makes that connection straight away. It is the right organisation. That is a news story that I read. Let's learn more about that organisation. As I said, we saw that the Nine pulling the advertorial so quickly as an opportunity to further influence Nine's climate coverage. We didn't want them just to cancel the advertorial. We wanted them to commit to properly covering climate change, as other news outlets like The Guardian and Croaky had done through the Covering Climate Now initiative. But it was also an opportunity to further engage our supporters on an issue that's directly connected to our overall mission, getting climate action to protect their health, and a chance to turn people who were seeing this unfold in the media into our supporters through acquisition. So we launched this petition on our website just after the article came out. You can see we reference the article. The website was built in 2015. So it wasn't the prettiest or the most intuitive website. Like that's literally what the website looked like, but it still got the job done. We got over 1,000 signatures. We got 1,100 signatures, I think, within around a week. When we launched the petition, we posted it on social media with the original thread that kind of laid out the issue. So updating people on how things are going and saying, if you engage with this thread, you might want to sign our petition. Everyone who signed the petition got an auto reply received an auto reply in their inbox. On Nation Builder, which is a CRM that we were using, you can go in and actually, under each petition page, you can edit the auto reply. So I make sure I always go in there and put in links that make it easy for people to share, so that once they've signed, it's easy for them to share with their networks and amplify their impact. So you can see that's a screenshot of the auto reply. It might be a bit small, but there's a link that they could tweet out the petition through. There's a link they could share on Facebook through. And we also made sure, we know that not everybody is on social media. We asked people to forward the email on, ask their friends to sign. We also used a tweet generator so that when people clicked that link in the auto reply, it would load their Twitter profile with that text already auto-filled. They could edit it if they wanted to, or they could just press send. One thing I did on this petition that I hadn't done before is I included our Twitter handle @HealthyClimate, which meant that every time someone who signed a petition and sent out a tweet encouraging their friends to sign, we got a notification about that. We could retweet that, and that again helped to amplify our reach. And it wasn't just us saying it. We were amplifying the voices of everyday people who obviously agreed with us enough to sign the petition and share it with their friends. And it makes it's an easy way to show it's a grassroots movement, because it's not just you saying it, there's lots of people saying, hey, I just did this, can you join me? After a couple of days, we emailed all petition signers, reporting back on the numbers of where they were at and asking them to share specific posts on social media. So it wasn't just an auto reply. We updated them on the campaign and said, can you help us reach the milestone of 1,000 signatures by sharing this post? So this is kind of the cycle of engagement and acquisition. You've got somebody in, you engage with them and you ask them to share, which is an action they can take. That will then help acquire more people. And then you have a bigger pool of people to convert into donors, for example. On Nation Builder, you can set up which page auto. So once someone signed the petition, you can decide which page they then land on automatically without you doing anything. We redirected people to our donate page, and we converted a small number of people who signed the petition straight into donors without us even having to ask. It was just part of the automated systems. At Kaha, we would reliably get a few $100s at least donated each time we launched an engagement action, just through having our pages redirect to the donate page. It also increases the pool of donors you have that you can go back to and ask to further support your work. So here's some of the results. We knew that publicly calling out 9 led them to withdrawing it, and so we hoped that we could keep the pressure on and influence them to be better on climate. In terms of results for engagement, I think within a week we'd had over 1,000 signatures. You can see in the first pie graph, 700 were new to our database. So although we emailed all of our supporters asking them to sign the petition, of the 1,100 people who signed, only 400 were already on our database. Before we launched this petition, our database was 4,500 people. And so 700 new people into the database is an increase of over 10% just from one petition that we launched. So that's significant for us. Given I was the only person employed in engagement at the organization, we didn't have the capacity to do a kind of sophisticated welcome series. So we kind of closed up that campaign really quickly, reporting back to them. We reached over 1,000 signatures, 9 pulled the advertorial, and we're going to keep working on this important issue of climate change together. But it was a meaningful impact by increasing our database by over 10%. That meant that over coming months, when we went back to our database of supporters, asking them to take further action with us, whether it's by donating or attending our fundraising dinner that we had the following month, we saw some of these people who had entered our organization through this petition being converted at a later date because we had a bigger pool of people to make those asks of. So finally, before I hand over to Nina to talk about their case study, some quick takeaways from this case study. Be responsive to moments, leverage those where you can. Also, social media can help be a good temperature check testing ground. So we just put it up on Twitter first before we invested any further organizational resources, which was my time as a staff member, into this campaign. Engagement doesn't have to be extensive. Like I said, all we used here was just my staff time. We used our existing website, Twitter page, Facebook page, and we used free online tools, the Facebook share URL generator and the tweet generator, which the tweet generator I've linked to in the resource page at the end of this presentation. I would encourage people to use those. And finally, you can see how it's not necessarily a linear process. It's this big cycle where new supporters came in, immediately we engaged them, asking them to share, which brought in new supporters, and then that larger supporter base we could convert later on. I might hand over to Nina to talk about their case study.
Thanks, Adam. So onto our second case study, I'll be looking at Time's Up, which was the US organization that was sparked from the Me Too movement. I worked with Time's Up, next slide. I worked with Time's Up to help them develop an engagement strategy, a brand new engagement strategy, and put into place the digital systems and tools to drive that strategy. I'm going to talk through what that looked like and give an overview of the tools and systems I used and the decisions we made and why. Overall, the goals for the engagement strategy they were looking to develop were fourfold. Firstly, to deliver a robust fundraising program, ensuring they had the funds to A, run the organization, so the administrative costs involved in that, and B, fundraising to develop a pool of funds that could be used as a legal defense fund in order to be able to represent for free women who experience abuse or harassment in the workplace. Secondly, their fundraising model needed to be low risk and sustainable. So essentially they wanted their current fundraising model, or their existing fundraising model at the time, was designed around philanthropic gifts. And that meant that it was highly dependent on the decisions of a very small number of people supporting them year on year. And they wanted to move it towards a small monthly donor strategy that would see and have a focus on regular donors sustaining the organisation and essentially distributing the risk much to a larger group of people. Third, they wanted to have a supporter base that was engaged and could be activated at key moments to push for change, whether that be legislative change, cultural change, or changes when it came to targeting and pushing in specific workplaces. And finally, they needed this to be primarily delivered online, which is something that a lot of us are facing in the organizations that we work in right now. So the first thing we did is we looked at the automations we could put into place using their CRM. So they used Nation Builder, and there are the two primary automations that I wanted to talk about that I think are relevant to a lot of organizations on the call. One was in the onboarding process. We wrote a welcome series that would be triggered as soon as someone signed up. So that's essentially a set of 4 emails sent over the course of the first 2 weeks of a supporter journey. They were excluded from all other communication until they had completed their welcome series, and then they would be folded into the overall email list. Secondly, we utilized a workflow tool, the workflow tool that exists in Nation Builder, to ensure that where appropriate, all roads on the website led to a monthly donor ask. Obviously, that needed to be where that was appropriate. That was where we would lead folks to a monthly donor ask. So that's people joining through the contact form, through surveys, petitions, sign-up forms. It was important that we had a consistent entry into the organization and people understood their role as a contributor. Automations like this can be really simple to set up, and they can also be quite complex depending on the capabilities of the CRM or the database system that you use. But they can make life easier and make the experience of signing up really smooth and consistent for every single person. So here's an example of the first email in the welcome series that we set up. This is the first email that someone got sent as soon as they signed up. This is, I'm sure everyone here has, when someone signs up, they get at least 1 email automatically when they join. But the thing I want to point out most here is that the copy we wrote worked to establish what we call a perception of need, which means essentially as soon as someone joins, you want to be establishing a relationship with a supporter from the get-go where they perceive themselves as the fuel that drives our impact. That everything we do, from representing clients to hiring staff to advocating for change, isn't possible without the contributions of our supporters. There is not some other body somewhere else that funds what we do. What we do is enabled by people like them contributing to our organization. And establishing that relationship from the very beginning is really important. So secondly, developing an acquisition strategy. We developed this primarily using Facebook Ads Manager to place ads on Facebook and Instagram and searching for high value supporters. And I'll talk about what I mean by high value supporters later. Next slide. The first and most important part of running this acquisition program was running dozens of test ads, and these can be really cheap, and they were. So this was running essentially a matrix of ads with various calls to action, images, audiences, and running versions of those ads with all those different variables. So this was dozens of ads. There were no more than $5 spent on a single ad. And this was our way of trying to find out what combination of variables was the most compelling for someone to sign up in our target audience. Part of what was really important here was not going for the lowest common denominator, but instead developing content that would compel the type of supporters that we wanted to sign up. People who were connected to our mission, and who were most likely to take action and donate in the future. So this is what I mean by a high value supporter, which often isn't the same as the cheapest supporter. This process helped us develop a baseline. So a baseline cost per acquisition, or CPA, which I think for us ended up being around $2.50. That varies depending on the type of supporter you're looking for and the size of the audience that you're targeting. And that CPA served as a benchmark, helping us decide for future acquisition ads, how were they performing against that benchmark, and would we turn them on or off depending on their performance. So based on the CPA, we decided a budget and then made sure that all those automations from the previous slide were in place in order to successfully shepherd new signups through an onboarding process once they had signed up through the ad. It's critical that these things go hand in hand. You don't want to be spending money bringing in new people only to have them disengage or unsubscribe or be confused about why they're receiving emails from you in the first place, because you haven't onboarded them properly. So here's an example of 3 ads that we tested. 3 different images, 3 sets of copy, 3 different calls to action at the bottom there, and we tested which combination of these things performed the best, and then we put more budget behind the highest performing ad. Just something, a quick tip on that. There is on Facebook, I forget what the exact link is, but you can search for the ad archive on Facebook, which is essentially where they legally have to show all ads placed on the platform. And you can kind of go through there, look at organizations that are similar to yours and see the types of ads that they're placing. You can't see who they're targeting, but you can have a look at the types of content that different organizations are using. So I put here some of the key takeaways that I think will help guide a good approach to acquisition. Firstly, ad testing can be really cheap. You can get an idea of what variables are performing better than others for as little as $5 an ad. So if you run 10 ads, that's only $50 for you to work out what variable is going to be the highest performing. You should always test. It takes a little more time in the setup, so you need to obviously have the capacity to be able to invest that time, but it does give you really valuable information, and it means you're not shooting in the dark. Secondly, know who your audience is. Make sure you know who you're targeting and why. And obviously for any of us who've used the Facebook Ads Manager, that it really guides you through that process. Outside of using a social media platform, there are obviously other ways that you can determine who your audience is and how you can target them. Thirdly, cheaper supporters aren't necessarily the best, like I said earlier. And fourthly, make sure you have some version of an onboarding process. The minimum viable product, the MVP of that could be one single email where you establish that the perception of what the relationship you want to have with your supporter. But if possible, I would encourage you for that to be more complex if you have the tools in your infrastructure that can help you do that. Next slide. So this was the approach that guided our work on Time's Up engagement with their supporters, and I think it's useful across all contexts. It was that the strongest organizations are built on ongoing and authentic engagement. This engagement should, 1, give supporters an active role to play in your mission, 2, deepen your supporters' relationship with your organization over time, and 3, build the confidence of supporters that together we can make a difference, that they see evidence of how they are impacting the mission throughout their involvement. The primary tool that we used to guide our engagement work was the use of an engagement calendar. And this might seem like a pretty obvious strategy, and it's something that a lot of us would use, but I think it's worth touching on because it's so essential. It's effectively a calendar, like annual calendar, populated with moments across the year, moments that are relevant to your mission, and that you could run campaigns around. These could be external things like an end of financial year that lots of nonprofits will be running campaigns around, or internal things like an internal milestone, a milestone around needing to have enough money to launch a new program. That could be something that is on your engagement calendar. This kind of proactive campaigning should obviously be coupled with the kind of reactive work, responding to moments that happen in the media, like Adam spoke about in his case study. We built our engagement calendar that had a variety of asks and methods of engagement, using many of the tactics listed in this slide, and built around several key moments. Having a dynamic and varied tool set is really important, both to keep your supporters engaged and to show that you're being strategic at each moment, rather than just asking people to do the same thing over and over and over. If you repeatedly ask your supporters to do the same thing, they risk becoming disengaged or even losing trust in your organization's ability to achieve its mission and to be effective. As you can see from the slide, some of the tactics you can use, things like filling out a survey, obviously volunteering, signing a petition, asking for feedback, or asking supporters what they think about a certain strategy. Something you can do at the start of every year or at the end of every year is getting feedback on what your strategic goals are for the following year, telling personal stories, buying tickets, things like that. Building a successful small dollar fundraising strategy was one of the key goals for our engagement work at Time's Up, and that saw us embed donation asks in almost every workflow and campaign we developed. All parts of the strategy were interdependent, with acquisition bringing in new supporters who could engage throughout the year and then at various points asked to chip in. Some of the key tactics that guided our fundraising work are listed here. So firstly, running mini email campaigns that were kind of identified throughout the engagement calendar that I spoke about before. We organized and ran several of these. With these, it was essential to communicate a goal, whether that be having a certain number of donors or an overall fundraising figure, a dollar figure, as well as communicating a deadline. Even if it's manufactured, even if you just midnight on the final day in May, we need to have reached this goal. As long as you have a goal, then you can build momentum towards that goal. And that's really a really important part of fundraising. Communicating urgency is an essential component of it. If you're not able to articulate why what you're doing is urgent, why it's important that someone donates now, then it's going to be really hard for a supporter to believe that now is the time that they should donate. It seems obvious, but I think often we will shy away from communicating urgency because we don't want to put too much pressure on people. But ultimately, it's about creating moments where people feel compelled to chip in. Secondly, we leaned hard into turning supporters into monthly donors, something that helped us ensure a sustainable income stream. Thirdly, donate landing pages for at the end of every website form. This is something that Adam spoke about earlier. It's a super easy automation that can be set up, and it's a simple tactic that can bring in passive income throughout the year. Fourth, you need to personalize your asks. Depending on the email tool you use, you should be able to add small personalizations to your email asks. This can be as detailed as the ask being specific to an individual person, which a lot of CRMs can do, including a CRM like Nation Builder, is you can ask someone to beat their last contribution, and you can specify what that contribution was. You can ask them to turn their most recent contribution into a monthly contribution of the same amount. Or if you don't have the ability to do that, you can segment your list into people who've never donated before and donors, and pitch a much smaller amount at people who've never donated before. Creating personalized asks is a great way to increase your income. And finally, always report back. Always ensure you're showing donors that you value them and avoid a purely transactional relationship. That's obviously really, really important, but it's the details like that that really matter. At the end of financial year campaign, you have to make sure you're reporting back to the people who've chipped into your campaign, and ideally to all of the supporters on your list. And finally, fundraising isn't dirty. If you believe in the mission of your organization and you need funds to grow and deliver your impact, then fundraising is the thing that is going to fuel your strategy being achieved. If you treat people authentically and communicate in an ongoing way, they're on your list because they believe in your mission. And on the whole, they want to be told the things they can do to make the most difference. So you've got to ask, and you've got to ask often. Adam?
Great. Well, that's almost the end. We'll move on to the resources and questions in a moment. But before we do that, we just wanted to reiterate some of the key takeaways from today. So no matter your organization's size, capacity, or budget, there are practical things you can do right now to increase engagement and grow your supporter base and convert people into donors or customers. We encourage people to think about the whole picture of your supporter journey, from the moment that they enter your organization as a supporter, when you acquire them, how you continuously engage them and regularly engage them, and regularly ask them to do more, and convert them into donors. Where possible, use automations to save time, improve engagement, and also, as Nina and I have talked about in our examples, create passive income flows for your organization. Make the most of key moments. So if there's an opportunity to, if you get media, make the most of that. If someone approaches you with something that you think is a bit outrageous, consider whether calling them out publicly is a useful thing to do. There's obviously risks involved in that as well. As Nina has mentioned, be authentic when communicating with your supporters and ask for help. Involve your supporters in your work and mission. You're not going to get it if you don't ask. So that's they're some of the key lessons that we hope that you take away. You can also access the slides afterwards, I think, or the recording, and I might hand over to Marcus to talk about the resources quickly.
Fantastic. Yes, slides and resources will be available afterwards, sent out by everyone. And I will say we've still got a few minutes left. So if you have questions for Adam or Nina or myself, please put them in the chat box. Really keen to answer any specific questions you have about your environment and how you can use some of these things that you've learned today. In terms of useful resources, so we've listed on this slide a whole range of guides and topics on the Digital Transformation Hub. There's the Digital Marketing Capability Assessment, where you can work through a short quiz. There's less than a half a dozen questions just to understand where you're at in terms of your digital marketing capability development. There's getting started on social media, email marketing, planning your online communications, accepting donations, as well as a whole range of training and guides that helps you to identify how you can make the most out of your efforts and really build that supporter and engagement base. Obviously also learning from what Adam and Nina has covered today. If you need to, would love you to book an expert consult, and then we'll provide tailored advice to help you work out, do you need to think about an improved CRM? What's your digital marketing strategy? How do you develop that? And because we're able to provide up to 3 30-minute free consults with an expert in that space. So really keen to help you in that area as well. Jane, might hand over to you now and see if you've got any questions for us.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you both. There are no questions at the moment. Everybody's being very quiet. If anybody wants to get any questions in, we still have 5 minutes. Or if anybody thinks of anything in the next couple of days, please do get in touch with us and we can pass on those questions to Adam and Nina. And as Marcus just said, yeah, you will be receiving a copy of the slides and the recording. Right, we have one from Mary. Are there any controversial campaigns you should avoid?
Oh, that's a hard. It depends, I guess, on a lot of different things, like which area you work in. I think that maybe that question came up because I said there was a risk in calling it out. When we got that offer, we had the decision: do we go public with this, or do we kind of just let it kind of go through to the keeper, I guess? And I guess we felt so strongly about it that we thought, hey, this is the right thing to do. And like I said, we kind of dipped our toe in the water. We just put it up on Twitter. You know, we didn't send a full database email straight away. We didn't go straight to media. We put it up there and saw that people shared our feelings and were probably motivated to do something about it, which led us to get media and then go into the petition. So yeah, I think there's definitely campaigns that you need to be cautious of, but I think having those discussions and being aware that there may be risks is probably the important part of the process. Nins, I'm not sure if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question, Mary. I think that it's depends on the risk appetite of your team and your organization. I think a lot of the places that I've worked, there is almost nothing better than being sued to turn that into a fundraising opportunity or a campaigning opportunity. But that isn't always the case, and it depends on the type of issue that you are. It depends where you get your funding. If you get government funding or if you get funding through grants, you obviously have to look at are there any risks associated with going after this certain campaign. So I think obviously having some kind of risk assessment internally that you go through, however complicated or simple that might be, but where possible, there are a lot of benefits to be had from being able to, as a campaign, position yourself against, I guess, the bad guy. So I think it's dependent on their context.
And Mary just followed that up with how would people respond to mention of lockdown, i.e. donate money you're saving by not going out?
I don't know what you think, Adam. I think that lots of people have more of a disposable income from being able to go out less, but lots of people don't. I think that you risk potentially risk insensitivity. Like if there are a lot of folks who have lost employment or lost hours during the lockdown. So I think it depends on who your supporters are, what you know about them, and yeah, I think there are a lot of ways you can communicate urgency at the moment, depending on the issue. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I was just going to say, whenever I write fundraising emails, I often try to include a couple of lines, like if you can afford to, or donate what you can afford, donate $25 or whatever you can afford. Every dollar makes a difference. So yeah, I always try to acknowledge that not everyone is in the position to donate. But also, as Nina was talking about, you can segment your list so that people who've donated in the past, you can actually email them and say, could you donate again? Or you can know which amount they've donated, so you can ask for the same amount because they've had the capacity to give that in the past. I think lockdown is a sensitive issue. I think you could say, like if you had an event and then you encourage people to come to an event to kind of build community during lockdown, and that could be a fundraising event like a trivia night online or a movie night online, you could say, like, in that event, if you're not buying your daily coffee, maybe you can chip in that amount as a contribution. But I'd just be wary that, yeah, lots of people have very varied experiences of lockdown, and so just treading carefully there, as Nina said, I think is wise.
Great. And one from Heather. I'm interested in the welcome series of emails. How do you ascertain how many and what content might make sense?
It's a good question. I think that probably it depends what type of engagement you're looking for from your supporters. I think if you are like a non-profit that doesn't have a complex ask of your supporters, it's you to be engaged, and eventually we want to turn you into donors. I think probably no more than 4. You don't want to leave too much time before this supporter gets folded into your list, because if you are doing ongoing engagement, then it's likely that you want them to be hearing from you about things that are happening in the world right now, and in order to stay relevant. So I would say no more than 4 emails over the course of a 2-week period. So there's not too much of a gap before they join your list. But this depends, and I think like you can have a welcome series and then you can see, are people actually dropping off at certain points? Are your open rates diminishing after a certain number of emails? And actually looking at the data in that way and seeing if there's value there or any harm from having a longer email series.
Lovely. Thank you. That looks like all the questions. Thanks once again, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And do keep in touch and keep an eye on your email. So we'll be sending the slides later on today. And if anybody could fill in the survey that will be popping up, that'd be really appreciated. Thanks once again. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.